Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this month's Brightelm webinar. I think it's our 6th or 7th this year so far. We took a brief break in August because it was a summer and we all need a break after all. But we're back now with our last 3 this year. So we'll have one this one, then we've got one at the end of October, and then we've got the last one of the year at the end of November. Today is all about marketing to new members, or really getting new members to events. Now it's a very specific topic. However, non-member revenue is very important. Non-members in general are very important to associations, not least because they generally pay more to attend. But events are an amazing source of potential new potential new member recruits. So it's in our interest to ensure that we're getting a really good number of non-members at our events. So in our panel today, we're going to be talking around this topic, looking at what maybe some quick wins are, how we can start to get to know those communities a bit better, and some tactics and how we can spread the word a bit better. So before I introduce the panel, as usual, just going to do a very quick overview of what Brightelm does. If I can have the slide, please, Alice. And thanks to Alice Higgins, who is streaming for us today. Thank you very much, Alice. So Brightelm, we're an event services company, professional conference organizer, specializing in working with associations. We cover 8 different service areas, so project management, sponsorship, exhibitions, logistics, delegate services, program management, and event marketing, both live and online, and of course hybrid. It's certainly a very busy period for us coming into the last few months of the year, as it is for everybody. Still getting inquiries about events wanting to be run during COP26, which is only less than, 6 weeks away now. So that's a very interesting time for us. But first of all, thanks very much, Alice. You can close the slide now. So first of all, introducing our first panelist, who is Miguel Neves, who has letters after his name, CMP DES. Welcome, Miguel. Miguel is, I've known Miguel, as we were discussing yesterday, for, ended up saying it was too long, I think, but it's about 12, 13 years, I think. You're now EventMB's editor-in-chief. You like to describe yourself as a curious creator and a caring curator of computerized content and a conscious connector of charismatic characters. I should have really practiced that before.
Woo, well done, Rob.
Thank you. I should have really practiced that before we went live. You live and breathe the event tech sector, Miguel. You have since I've known you. Thanks so much for joining today. What, in your opinion, is the quick win or the must-have that associations need in order to gain new non-member audience participants?
Thank you, Rob, for having me. And I love this question because it's like, okay, give us everything you have right now at the start of the webinar. So I'm going to start just with a kind of summary statement, or a simple kind of concept, which is that every company, every organization should be a media company. And what I mean by that is, in the past, especially when we're talking about B2B events and B2B businesses, we had this idea of, we were an association, we were a body, a company, and we kind of had a PR team, and we kind of worked independently, and we did stuff and people paid attention. And I think today that's not necessarily true. And I think companies and organizations that can behave like media companies can think about acquiring audiences, connecting with communities like media companies, understanding their communication very well. They're the ones that are better equipped to communicate effectively with their community, and ultimately to do this thing that we're looking for, which is to kind of raise revenue, particularly from non-members. Because I think when it comes to memberships and associations, some do a great job and the membership feels very united. Some may not do such a great job, but when you're looking outside of that kind of united community, you need to think like a media company. So that would be my kind of first statement around that.
Think like a media company. I think we'll be discussing that in a bit more detail later. Thanks very much for now, Miguel. Bring on my next panelist, who is Adam Baggs. Adam is a PR expert who I've also known for a considerable number of years. He's got several years working as event organizer within two of the industry's leading event management agencies. And Adam's got a very unique perspective to PR and communications, and has recently, and not so recently now, actually been become a practicing hypnotherapist. I know has been speaking in the industry on this topic. Good morning, Adam. Welcome.
Hi, Rob. Thank you very much for having me. A real pleasure to be here.
My absolute pleasure. And the same question to you. Is there a quick win that associations need in order to be able to gain new audience members?
I don't think there is any sort of instant quick win. I mean, obviously, some great content, that kind of thing might bring in the odd person out, but ultimately, I think the most important thing is you've got to have relevance and credibility. By building that relevance and credibility in terms of content, the way you work as an association, the way you deliver, people are going to find you engaging. They're going to trust you. They're going to want to come along. Depending on the extent they know you, and the referrals will come through that. And that credibility is in particular so important. And what that will then allow you to do is build a community and engage more effectively. And once you've got that community, once you've got those conversations flowing backwards and forwards, that's going to bring on the non-members. That's going to bring those people who are saying, yeah, this is something I want to be a part of, something I want to see, and something I want to know about. And I totally agree with what Miguel was saying about media, about publishing the right content as well. That's so important, because we have to understand what it is that our audiences and potential audiences consume. And if we understand what they consume, we can put the right stuff in front of them, so they'll be interested, so they'll engaged, and then come join us, come join our communities, come join your communities, and ultimately, therefore, be a part of your audiences going forward.
Thanks very much, Adam. So effectively, we need to get to know our audiences, and I definitely know we're going to be discussing that in one of the later questions that we've got. Thank you very much, Adam. We'll come back to you later. Our final panelist is Sarah Ameson. Sarah is sales and marketing specialist at Brightelm, so is a colleague of mine, and joins me today with that hat on. Sarah's got a very long and distinguished track record in sales and marketing, and has a keen eye for copywriting. She loves nothing more than making someone happy, which is good for me, I guess. So thank you very much for joining this morning, Sarah. Really appreciate it, and welcome.
Thank you, Rob.
I'm particularly looking forward to us getting back to the office on Monday. So we're going to actually be working in the same place all the time, which I'm very excited about too. So to you, the same question, do you think there's a must-have that associations need in order to gain new member audiences?
I think that, kind of building on what Miguel and Adam said, really, there are no real quick wins, but there are certain things you can do. And I think one of the key things is understanding your audience, but also understanding your value to them. Actually, what's appealing to your members, and therefore what then appeals to your non-members? What are your non-members not having? What do they want to join? What does your association give them? And I think once you understand your value more and how you can approach that can feed into your content and your marketing as well. So you are really, honing in on the right audience as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'd like now to invite the other panelists back. So we're all together, and we're going to look at our first question. A message to the audience who are watching: if you do have questions, please use the live Q&A function, which you'll find on the right hand side of your screen. You can also say hello to us in the discussion forum. And please, we want your questions. We would like to hear whether you agree or disagree with the panelists, or what you really want to know. These webinars are only as good as as your input is. So I'd like to come back to actually a point you made, Adam, first of all, which was how can we, you said we need to get to know our non-member communities. So how do we start doing that?
I think a fundamental part of it is around generating conversations, is getting out there, getting to know them, finding the mutual friends, referrals, organizations, people in between who are going to start talking to you and telling you about them. But I think I hope all association professionals know what it is that they're great at and what it is that they're great at getting out there. So hopefully they'll have a strong concept. Hopefully all of our audience will have a strong concept of what it is their ultimate audiences want to be hearing about. So by honing that, making that work for them, work for their audiences, hopefully they're going to start generating the conversations, getting people interested, getting that stuff out there in the right places. So people are going to start noticing, getting to know the association a bit better, wanting to hear more. I think, I'm sure Miguel will talk about the benefits of a good headline and that kind of thing when it comes to the media. So getting that hook out there that draws people in. I mean, this week, the horror stories going on around the country to do with fuel and all that kind of thing. So much that is driven by a great headline on the news that makes you dive in and read something which is exactly the same as something you read a week ago in the news or 2 days ago. But a good headline will draw us in, give us loads more to learn, and you get sucked in, and that's something we can learn. And I'm sure Miguel will reflect on that a bit more. We can learn from the media, that ability to really communicate effectively and draw people in. I can't hear you, Rob. I'm not sure if you're muted.
I put myself on mute to drink a glass of water, which is, of course, is a professional thing to do. And then Alice has kindly unmuted me now, so thank you very much for that. I think it's a very interesting point you were making about headlines and seeing this week how, and I've started really analysing articles when they're written. We're all, as event managers, we're all very, very critical. We're relatively good at analysing things, and it only takes one word to change the emphasis of something to change the whole meaning of a headline, and not even a headline, an article. And it's very obvious. And in fact, there's some very obvious reporting at the moment, particularly from some of the broadsheets where they are leading you down a particular route, which may be either anti-government, anti-Tory, anti-Labour, anti-whatever they want, and it's all very negative rather than positive. But Miguel, Adam was alluding to media, is there a trick to getting that headline pull absolutely right?
Sure. I mean, I think Adam is a way more experienced expert at that than I am. But I've only been in the role, in editorial role, for 7 months or so. But there is a lot of care in that. I think when you talk about media at the moment, there's it's almost a dichotomy. Like, media needs to get sensational headlines. Even if you're the most respected media channel, a good headline makes people open. It's the above the fold and below the fold. It makes people kind of want to know more about something. So getting that right is really important. I know from the people that I'm working with, I get a lot of feedback on the headlines that I create, even on stories that I write. And one of the sort of most basic things that I could say is that when you communicate, when you get a headline out there, it has to be something that the wider audience will understand. If you see a headline full of abbreviations, full of acronyms, full of terms that are really obscure, that's really not going to do you any good. And I think, when you're internal, you can kind of feel that abbreviates and everybody's going to understand that. But especially when you're looking for sort of a broader audience, you need to explain these things. And so I think it's important that headlines are succinct, that they tell an interesting story, and they get you interested in the other thing. And I think it's a really great point, because I see headlines in everything that we do, on social media, on any sort of communication. People are only going to read it if the headline is interesting. People are only going to open something if that initial reaction is, of interest, of curiosity. And so I think that's actually a super important thing for any association and their communication, to really consider that, particularly for people that may not be used to their internal language, to how they kind of talk about stuff in day to day. The more abbreviations we use, I remember, I've been working with MPI and as a volunteer member for years. And I remember somebody raising their hand at one of these town halls at their big kind of annual 2,000-3,000 person event, saying, there's posters spread all around the city saying MPI WEC is in town. Joe Schmo from the corner has no idea what MPI or WEC is. So that poster is completely useless, only to the 2,000 or 3,000 people that are in town, which is fair enough if that's the only function of the poster. But it would be great if the poster would kind of advertise to the other millions of people that are in the city to say, this is a conference for event professionals. And event professionals have conferences and they need to kind of get together and do this. That would be a great use of that poster, if you print all these posters and put them all around town. And I think that's the kind of thing that all associations can learn from. It's like, if you can simplify that language, not to go to extremes, but just make it succinct and simplified, I think that'll help all associations in kind of all sorts of communication.
Absolutely, simple headlines are key, and I think that's the example you've given. Then I think we all see international conferences around the world. Possibly when the city, rather than MPI spending that money, it's the city who are actually spending that money, saying, "Look, this conference is here. Isn't this great? We've done this for you." But actually, that message isn't getting through. I wonder, Sarah, if you've come across any, from your perspective, any practical things you've done or you've experienced about how people can have a better understanding of what non-members need, or how we engage with non-members.
Oh, it's a good question. So I think that boils down to knowing certain things about your own or your current members. What are their likes? What are their other interests? Because a lot of the time people have shared interests. They might be members of multiple different associations. So actually working out your current audience and then understanding their other likes, what else do they do? You might find that, harmony within another association, which actually has a lot of crossover. So I think it just goes a lot deeper into knowing who you already have as a member and what they do, and utilizing that to kind of reach those non-members. And also referrals. There's so many times that people attend something because they know so and so is going to it. So actually working out those referrals as well, and potentially you could create like a referral system for members. For example, if they were to bring a new non-member to your event, they get a discount on their ticket. There's things that they can do to encourage their current members to bring along non-members as well. So yeah.
I think that this idea about referrals, it's often overlooked. The most powerful, the sale or the inquiry which is most likely to convert is the one that's a referral from someone that they trust. And actually, there are some very good technical solutions that I know. One relatively major software provider in our industry did this a while ago, where upon checkout of registration, every attendee was given a badge which they could share with a discount code. And there was actually a possibility that if somebody else booked as a result of that badge, then that original member would then get a rebate from their original ticket price. That's incredibly powerful way to get people in. I mean, it can work for members and non-members because it can help members to help remind members. But I think in terms of reaching out and methods for engaging non-members, that works incredibly well. I think in terms of non-member communities, I mean, the obvious place to go for kind of special interest groups certainly in industry is LinkedIn. I don't think LinkedIn groups don't really work as well as they used to, but can they? I guess this is an open question to any of the panelists. Can LinkedIn groups still be used effectively as a tool to engage with non-members?
I got a lot to say about this.
Go on. Great. Excellent.
Well, I think you have to separate two things. One is the concept of groups online, and the other is LinkedIn. right? I think LinkedIn has made some design changes to the platform where they've tried to integrate groups into sort of your normal feed, and that hasn't worked. LinkedIn's doing a lot of things right. I think LinkedIn does their feed really well, but from a technical perspective, they've sort of given up on groups. So LinkedIn groups as like a technology isn't very well supported at the moment. You can't do that much with groups. So removing that aside, I think it's always a good opportunity to do groups. And I think, you know, you work with the delegate wranglers, and that's a fascinating Facebook group. You know, and the fact that it's on Facebook and not on LinkedIn probably means that it reaches that bit more people, a few more people that it may not have reached on LinkedIn. And some people aren't that active on LinkedIn, especially on the sort of buyer side. And the delegate wranglers, you know, it does a lot of stuff now, but essentially it started off as like, if you're a buyer, you have a request, you put your stuff in there, and then people can respond. And that was the basic kind of function of it. And that just works really well because people need quick responses. They need creative ideas. They need suppliers that can get things to them, you know, yesterday in a remote location somewhere. And that's a great use of the groups. So I think when you can identify a really good use of a group, and particularly if that good use of the group can kind of touch external people, then I think it's a great way to use social. The great thing about using groups is you're not upsetting your parents and your family and stuff about stuff that they don't care about. You're only talking to the people that actually care about. So it works really well. So as a theory, using groups on social media and bringing in outside non-members into those groups or not, you can say, look, this is only for members. This is one of the member benefits, that can also be something that's worth considering. But I think as a concept, it's probably one of my favorite uses of social media, and I highly recommend that.
Great. Thanks very much, Miguel. I don't know if that was coincidence, but actually Neil Thompson from the Delegate Wranglers just joined us and said hello, just as you were talking about the Delegate Wranglers. So actually that's quite coincidental. Good morning, Neil. And hello to Yvonne as well, and also to Jed, just some of the people who've joined us online this morning. Could you please repeat what you said? And that's incredibly embarrassing. That's, even though I put my phone on silent, tech things happen. That's Siri getting a bit overexcited and thinking that I'm asking it particular questions. So I'm just gonna turn that off. That's another learning for us all, isn't it? Adam or Sarah, did you have anything to add in terms of LinkedIn groups or any other kind of group networking, like online networking or dissemination of information?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I agree with Miguel in terms of the whole LinkedIn groups thing can just disappear down a rabbit hole, and they're hidden. And it's sort of, sometimes they become very stale very quickly, whereas Facebook seems to happen a lot more swiftly on it. I don't know if people are on there for personal reasons, so therefore they jump into the other groups and they're relevant groups and that kind of thing. Whereas on LinkedIn, people seem to go back a lot less often. I mean, one of the areas, I mean, obviously we're talking primarily here about kind of, you know, building communities. Now, I suppose one of the really powerful elements around LinkedIn for those people with budget to reach audiences is the paid element, that ability to narrow down paid stuff so, you know, so focused, so in depth to specific audiences around job titles and that kind of thing. Obviously that does involve budget, so, you know, it's not right for everybody. But I think, you know, I'm personally so much more active on those Facebook groups because I'm jumping into it for other reasons, and you see stuff come through that's just relevant. You know, so I do all stuff to do with hobbies and that kind of thing, as well as delegate wranglers and other work-related ones. Whereas LinkedIn, I do sort of, you know, building a community. I think, you know, I guess you guys will certainly know more about this than I will. I think there's a lot of other more focused tools to build that community once you know what you're doing, rather than trying to somehow make LinkedIn work for you and that kind of thing. But I'll refer back to the experts to comment in more depth on that.
I think that for me, the issue with that, with advertising to a new member market, using paid advertising, is that whilst you can make it very specific, it doesn't allow you to understand your audience. You know, and that whole, your first point, Adam, which I think is the most valid, is that you have to understand what the non-members want. Understand why aren't they members in the first place? Is it because they don't know anything about you, which is a huge issue in itself. But if they don't know anything about you, that should then lead the messages which you are using to promote the event. But I think there's nothing beats the personal touch in networking. And I know without fail, the more you engage with the group, the more you get to know that group, the more you get to know the people involved, and the more you are likely as an organizer to convert, if we're going to use a quite a harsh term, but I think it's irrelevant, to convert non-members to your event. You know, the personal touch is hard to argue with. I'm going to move on to a slightly related topic, and it's a question for Sarah. Sarah, how can we use commercial partnerships to leverage non-member attendance?
So with this, I think there's a lot to be said about, with your partners, making sure they're the right fit for what your message is for the conference or the event. Actually, do they align well with what your agenda's talking about? Because, and also with your company, is there a harmony between those? And then what you're doing is, if you've got those partnerships that, you know, work well, who are their audience? Like, surely there's members of their audience who are, you know, interested in what they offer. So if our audience is interested in their offer as well, there's going to be some alignment there. So making sure that when you're posting on social media about your partnerships, you're tagging them in, you're accessing their audience, asking them to announce that they are partnering as well is also really key. You know, there's a lot to be said about spreading, you know, word of mouth, and that's so important. And I think just really tapping into their audience and ensuring that they are all aligned, it works really well.
Shouldn't we be using that as a negotiation, as part of negotiations in sponsorship and partnership sales, where we say, okay, well, we want your sponsoring this event, great. We'd like you to promote the event by email on socials, and we will contract X number of emails going to, you know, ask for you to send X number of emails specifically promoting the event to your audience. I mean, that can't hurt, right?
No, yeah. And if anything, it's boosting their awareness if they're talking about the event. And even if, you know, there's a potential you could do backlinking on their website, backlinking on your website, you know, there's all these things that you can look into that can just expand your audience and reach those non-members and put you on the map for them. Just
in case, what's backlinking?
So backlinking is where they're, tell me if I'm wrong, Miguel and Adam, because I might be wrong. But it's where you have a link on someone else's website that feeds back to your website, or for example, in your newsletters, they backlink to certain websites. So it's all about tracking movement. So you can see then if they sent out a newsletter which had a link to your website, and then you notice on your Google Analytics or however you're monitoring that, where those links are coming from. So you've kind of got some proof of what's worked, where are your audience coming from, and how have they gotten there. But that's probably a whole nother webinar.
I think backlinks is very interesting, and I'm just reminded of this idea of contra deals. Now, often one potential pool of non-members is to market via similar associations. Now, often this is done through the use of a contra deal. It's a bit of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But I've certainly found in the past, it's actually in practice, it's very difficult to engage these associations. They'll say, yes, we'll do it if you promote our event, etc., which is all great. But actually, does it make a difference? Have any of you ever seen a contra deal that's really, really worked well?
I'm with you, Rob. I don't think it makes a difference. I think it's not the right way to do things. I think there's a lot to be said about the energy around things. Like, somebody will agree to something, but that doesn't mean their energy is really focused on it. Especially like an association promoting a potentially competitor association, that feels really strange. Like, that's quite tricky to get that right. And even if they do agree to it, then it might be like a small mention, you know, lower down in the newsletter or something like that. There's also sort of like, who's saying what, right? Sometimes when I used to kind of coach on social media, I would take exactly the same LinkedIn posts and put it coming from a corporation, and then put the same text coming from a person. And people would immediately see that, like, when that comes from a person, it feels different. And I think it's the same kind of situation here, because when you have a certain association saying nice things about another association, when you read that as a member of, association A, you're going to always read that in kind of a weird kind of like, oh, that's weird. They're promoting that event. Okay, that's interesting. So the text might be all, very promotional and very right, but it just doesn't sound right. Like, what's that voice? Whose voice is it that's saying that? So I think that there's other ways of doing that. And if we want to go like down the marketing route, I think in terms of like targeting on social media and ads and that kind of thing, you can target somebody else's followers. Yeah. That might be a way more effective way of getting a sort of ad out there, particularly to an audience outside of your membership. So I would probably go down that route rather than create these partnerships that might not have the right energy around them.
And I think I think in terms of you said what I was just about to say, actually, Miguel, in terms of targeting your competitors' followers, it's incredibly easy to do, and they're probably doing it for your event. So why not do it back to them? If they're not doing that, then take advantage of that, and nobody need ever know that you're doing it. So if you have a good positive relationship with another association, you're not seeing anything from them, but just make the most of it. Adam, anything on contra deals?
Yeah, so I mean, I personally don't like the word contra very much, and the whole concept of contras. And I just think, first of all, if you're ever going down the contra, you've got to be so clear and so specific about the commercial value to each partner, as otherwise that can, in the long term, create a disaster. One of the things that sprang up as we were talking, then it goes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, Rob, about the importance of the personal relationships, where I think sometimes the commercial partnership thing I see work quite well around events, and Miguel will know this very well from an event he used to work on, and I've worked with another event, is the hosted buyer concept, that concept where you get the commercial partners and that to invite their contacts, invite their people along to an event for whatever benefits those are for either side of the partnership. I think that can be a highly effective way to bring in new audiences to an event when it works successfully, as long as ultimately there is value for everyone involved. I think that's the most important thing around these commercial partnerships. Everyone's got to see a value in it, otherwise someone's going to frankly just not enjoy the experience and not want to come back, and that's where things fall down.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's an amazing discussion. I always love having all of you on a panel. You come up with such gems. I want to talk about things from a bit of an operational perspective and looking at tech. Is there and we've kind of alluded to it a little bit regarding targeted marketing on LinkedIn, etc. But what tech is available out there to help us grow our audiences? Miguel.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to talk about here. I go back to my first point in the introduction about everybody acting like a media company, and I think it's important to understand what you have available to you. I think the advertising world, looking at social media from an ad perspective, incredibly powerful. You can target people, followers of a competitor, followers of a competitor event, but different kind of media have different targeting capabilities. And ultimately, what makes events so interesting from a targeting perspective is that they're incredible filters. If you can target people that go to a specific event that's a competitor event, you pretty much know that those people are interested if you're offering a similar kind of thing, that they're interested. And that's really hard to do with generic things. If you just want to run an ad on Facebook or LinkedIn, on LinkedIn you get a lot of job information. But however, sometimes that job information isn't necessarily what you need specifically. Like you have sort of broad categories, but to get really detailed is sometimes quite hard. When you go to Facebook, you get a lot of personal likes. Like this person likes swimming, this person likes whatever, but you don't get a lot of job information. So Facebook is traditionally much better for kind of a B2C campaigns than B2B campaigns. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like the basic advertising. But I think that's kind of a really good place to start, because if you you don't need to be an expert in this, but the more you understand of what's possible in each of the things, I always, it is good to work with an agency or somebody who really understands that. But if you understand what's possible, then you won't spend your time and resources or money in the wrong places. So I think that's really important. I think the other side of it is, with technology, is this idea that you're probably not going to have one tool that solves everything for you. There isn't a magical tool that gets you extra revenue, extra ticket sales, extra revenue from non-members. There's a number of tools that work in different ways. And I think one of the most powerful tools is the idea of marketing automation. You may have heard of HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, those kind of things. They're essentially sort of email and social media scheduling tools, but they have a lot of tracking involved in them. So you can do some pretty impressive stuff, like have something on your website, and then the simple thing is somebody downloads something, you get their email address, you add them to a sort of newsletter or whatever, and even though they're non-members, you can kind of nurture them and send them information that they like. But you can do way more advanced stuff. Like you can send an email out to everybody and have like 5 options in that email, and you can figure out which option they clicked on. Like if you say, hey, what do you like best? Is it this, this, or that? And then whatever they click on, and then send follow-up emails to that person that clicked on option C that are different to the things that clicked on option, to the people that clicked on option A. So again, this is like, I don't think event managers and association executives should necessarily be experts on this, but understanding what's possible, I think, is super powerful. And I'll add just one other thing that's super powerful, which is the idea of like tracking pixels. Now, these are changing and there's some sort of controversy around this, but if you have tracking pixels on your website and you can kind of create, essentially you can create an audience on Facebook or LinkedIn for anybody who's been on your website, it's an incredible, powerful way of segmenting, targeting. If somebody's been on your website, particularly if they've spent a few minutes on your website, you know that they're must be somewhat interested in what you do, right? And then if you can just target those people with ads, you're going to save a lot of money. And you can get those ads to be really specific. Whilst if you're just sort of targeting anybody who's interested in skincare, let's say you're in dermatology or something like that, that's a really broad topic. And they may not want to be interested, or they may not want to be part of an association. But if they've been on your website, then you're getting kind of lower in the funnel. So hopefully I didn't go too much all over the place, but there's so much to talk about here. And I think it's important for association professionals to just have an understanding of what's possible, so they don't go on sort of like a magic hunt of members somewhere, but kind of say, hey, these technologies could actually be really useful. And more often than not, I find that the kind of latest in marketing technologies are really useful. They're not designed for associations. So a lot of associations sort of say, no, that's not how we operate. That's not what we want. But actually, there's really useful things that you can do with those if you have the resources to invest in them.
I think this is part of the the association mantra, if you like, which is if you stay still, you die as an organization. So we need to be embracing change, embracing different way of doing things. And there isn't any marketing activity which is a catch-all. There's no one thing which is okay. My first question was a bit of a trick question, because I asked the question, what is the quick win? And there aren't really any quick wins. It's about trying different things in different channels in different markets until you find something which works for you. And when you find that it works for you, just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and get better and better at it. But we also have to bear in mind that we all think differently, we all buy differently. So different ads would appeal to different people, different wordings, different sites. Some people will buy. So some people, if we take Google as an example, I don't think Google AdWords is right for any association to get their message out, because it's very, very difficult to get it absolutely refined. But I've lost my train of thought.
Disagree there with you slightly.
Yeah, go on. Please disagree.
Well, I think when it comes to all advertising, the more specific you want to get, the more expensive it gets.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to target like people who are interested in apples, you're going to pay very little per each click or whatever. But if you're going to get very specific, it's going to get very expensive. So I think it sometimes is worth getting really specific, because you know that if somebody researches, I don't know, education in dermatology, they're going to be a pretty good client for a dermatology association, right? But that's going to be a very expensive Google click. So you're going to have to kind of measure that out. Is it worth putting an ad out there for that and then showing up top of the list in the ad section? Or are you going to like not do ad spending? So I disagree slightly, but it does get very expensive. So it's not easy to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I still can't, I've still lost my train of thoughts. I'm sure it will come back probably this evening when I'm lying in bed and I go, that was it. And I'll let you know what it was. But Adam, what have you seen working? Is there any tech from your perspective that has really, you see really work or help?
Operationally, it's, in all honesty, it's not an area I particularly get involved in. So actually, I'd be speaking almost more from a consumer point of view than anything else. I mean, I do think there is that, I don't know exactly where you're going with the Google thing, but I can't imagine there's too many people randomly Googling the fact they want to be a part of a specific association. What is the association, this sector, etc. I think people are going to find these things in other ways, quite often through recommendations and that. I have to say one thing I have found quite interesting recently, and it's in many ways totally different to this. As you mentioned at the beginning, the work I've been doing qualifying with hypnotherapy, almost all of my marketing for that is through Google Ads. But again, it's what you were saying earlier, B2C market, works very effective and incredibly refined right down to just a few miles away from where I am and that sort of thing. Whereas, if you just went for everywhere, it costs an absolute fortune. It's less relevant. So that, again, that relevance, that specific targeting, I think, Miguel's right. It costs more if you want to be really specific, but sometimes that is worth doing. If you want to, if you can guarantee you're going to, I know you can't guarantee, but it's worth spending that money for the really high quality lead rather than just a bunch of question marks out there. But I think, Miguel and probably Sarah as well are better able to comment on operational specifics.
I mean, we all have to make our own paths when it comes to this, and there's no, despite the number of LinkedIn messages I get to another effect, there's no one way to generate good qualified leads. I get quite a few messages now from people saying, do you want 5 or 6 qualified leads a day? Actually, no, I don't want 5 or 6 qualified leads a day, because we wouldn't be able to handle them. But I remembered what I was saying about Google. It's about how people buy, and different people buy differently. For example, I will not buy via a Google ad. So the one when you do your Google search and get to the top, you'll see the sponsored ads, the sponsored links first. I will never click on a sponsored link. I'll always go down and see the top organic link. And I think that's because I don't often trust advertising, particularly on Google, if it's a service which I don't know. However, having done some Google ads for different clients in the past, people do click on them, and it does generate leads for the right market. So what one consumer like, and I'm talking consumer in a general sense, that you can have a business consumer or a private consumer, I guess. We are generally talking about consumers, but people do buy differently, and so this is why one strategy and one way of doing things in order to generate new members doesn't work. You need to vary it. Just a reminder, everyone, if you have questions, please submit them using the live Q&A tab, or make a comment in the discussion forum. Sarah, anything from you on what's working from a technical point of view, or tools you can use?
Yeah, so just building on what Miguel said. So HubSpot's a tool that I've used quite a lot. I love it. It tells me what everyone's doing with what I send them, which is fantastic when you're thinking of your sales journey. but it tells you a lot about, like, for example, if you were to send an email that linked to a prospectus, and say they click on that prospectus and they spend X amount of time on certain pages, you know what they're interested in, you know they've read everything. They may have just glanced at it because you'll know how long they've looked at something for. So it gives you real insight into where they are in their buyer's journey, and I think that's an amazing tool to be able to have that. It's also quite scary when you really boil down with anything in marketing and with tracking and everything. You realize there's a lot out there, but there's also things to be said for, like, with your advertising, with A/B testing. You know, your newsletters, how much engagement do they have? If you were to change certain elements and try something different, what difference does that make? But the key thing, obviously, with A/B testing is not to change too much between the two variants, because what you need to do is narrow down what is effective. And if you change too much, it's too hard to narrow that down. It's the same with your advertising. You know, as Miguel said earlier, when a company posts something, what's the engagement like, as opposed to when a person posts something, and monitoring that and working out the best way to reach those non-members through that advertising stream. Oh, you're on mute again, Rob.
That raising eyebrows was at me, not at anyone else. I've absolutely valid points, Sarah. I think just going back to that point about everyone's different. Yvonne Zucker has posted a comment. It took her about 2-3 years to choose to become a member of an organization, so never give up in targeting potential joiners. And it's very, very true. It can take a very, very long time to make that plunge, and it can take an ask and ask and ask. You need to keep trying it again and again and again, assuming that organization might be Abco, Yvonne, but you can let me know about that. Just moving on to our next question, and it's really about strategy, I guess, because every associations of pretty much most association events have competitors. Now that other event may be another association's event, or it may be a commercial rival. So that's a company who exists to make money from running an event on that topic, or multiple events even. But what advantages can associations play to when pitching against their competitors? I'll go to Adam first.
I think almost goes back to my answer to the first one about credibility and relevance. You know, we've all got competitors in everything we do, but again, you said, Rob, earlier, personal relationships, we're trying to talk to individuals about their individual things, and I appreciate associations are far bigger than each, you know, all the individuals, and they've got larger numbers than that, but we've got to be appropriate to them. So demonstrating our knowledge, demonstrating community, demonstrating that desire to kind of pull around and wrap members up and say, you know, this is the place to be for you. You know, just showing, you know, that whether it's a USP, whether it's just a few things that keep making it more and more relevant, so that people go, yeah, this is the one I want to join. I mean, there was an article in one of the event industry media a while ago about the number of associations within the events industry, for example, that an event organizer in the widest sense can join, whether it's exhibitions, outdoor events, PCOs, commercial events. There's so many, you know, and some of those will try to sell to everyone, but the ones that seem to be, in my experience, the most successful are the ones that are going, no, this is what we do. This is where we specialize. Sure, chat to our competitors. They got some really useful stuff, but when you want to be with your tribe, your people, then we're the ones that, you know, we're the people that count for you.
I guess the events industry is actually a very, very good example of where there is overlap. So there are very specific disciplines within the events industry. You know, being involved in association events is one. Exhibitions is another. But there's already an overlap there, because the vast majority of large association meetings have exhibitions as it's part of them. And I think perhaps if we start to think about that in context with other associations, it's about where else you overlap to, not just your direct industry and your direct specialism, but where else do you overlap that might be relevant, or you might be able to provide relevant content for. Miguel, advantages of associations over commercial?
Well, I think there's a kind of impartial approach to it that I think is important. But I'd like to sort of question your question in a way, or at least raise a flag, because I think if we're all media companies, or if we're all media organizations, like I said at the beginning, then we need to stand out. And I think associations can run the risk of feeling like they're special, feeling like they're different, and then have their market completely overrun by a commercial organization that understands marketing, that moves faster, that does things faster. Because I think, for a tenured member that likes the association, likes the group of people that run the association, and likes the community, that will always offer a warm, fuzzy feeling that they can't really get from a transactional approach. But from the wider audience that I think a lot of associations are trying to reach, I don't think a lot of potential members are looking for that, or kind of see that as a positive. And sometimes it's a negative because they see very cliquey, or there's a group of people that do everything at this association, but then everybody's an outsider and they don't feel included. And because commercial organizations move faster and kind of, I think, go much stronger in terms of marketing, it's going to be tough to compete with those. So I think sort of looking for reasons why an association is better because they're an association and a commercial product is not as good, I think that can be really dangerous. And that can lead you to like this false sense of security. Like, no, people aren't going to buy from this other competitor because they're not credible. Well, I don't I need to see proof of that. Like, is that actually something people search for? Or is that just something that associations hide behind? Like, oh, they don't have the same accreditation that we do, or we have the accreditation, so they could never, reach our level. Well, if they sell more and they become the go-to place for education on a particular topic, then by default, you're wrong, right? And I think that's the thing that can be really dangerous, to get stuck in this, we're better than them because we're an impartial association. I just want to say that's dangerous. And I think it's very kind of short-term thinking.
I think impartiality is only one of the attributes which I would put on there. But you're absolutely right in that, if the commercial market can move quicker, and often does, particularly when change happens, and change, as we all know, change in 2021 happens an awful lot quicker than it did in even 2011, 10 years ago. If they can react quicker, you're already on a back foot. So it's really important to be on top of your marketing and know where to go, where you have something, where you want to say, and your rivals will be doing it. And I think what you were saying, Miguel, about kind of alluding to parity there, it is very dangerous for associations to say the commercial conferences aren't as good because they're for profit rather than not for profit. There's also no reason, if the events are of similar quality, why an association should charge any less because it's a not-for-profit than a commercial company. Now, an event manager may well say, well, we charge less because we can charge less because we don't have to make a profit. That's different than saying, oh, well, no, our conference is less because it's not for profit. It's a bit of a subtle difference there. But, the more you charge, the more you will be able to afford better marketing and therefore get more people in. It's a self-perpetuating circle. Sarah, anything else on, how associations can pitch themselves against commercial conference?
Yeah, I think it's understanding your commercial competitors. What do they do well? What do they do differently to you? You know, you really need to have a good analysis of what else is out there. Same with other associations who are competing for the same audience. You know, why are they getting certain members that you aren't? You know, once you understand what they're doing and what they're doing well, maybe you get ideas that you could adapt into your own association, but also it gives you a better idea of how you can work yourselves. And I think competitor analysis goes across every industry. You need to do that. You need to be aware of what's out there. And it's just as important for associations to know that in a commercial sense as well as other associations.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah. We're going to move to wrap up very, very shortly, but I really just want to do a last round of the panel and ask you if, you know, if there were any kind of closing thoughts you'd like to offer about this topic, or anything which we haven't covered in the questions. And rather, would anyone like to go first?
I don't mind.
Okay.
I think the key thing for me is to do your research. You know, understanding your audience so that you understand who your non-members could be. So you're getting you're getting the starting picture of what's going on in that community. And I think it goes across the board. Always do your research when you're approaching partners for new conferences. Why would they want to partner with you? What is the alignment there? And it just goes into everything. So for me, it's always do your research.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Miguel or Adam?
One of the things that it goes on from what Sarah was saying about the research and that, and I think there's the importance of understanding sort of, for want of a better word, the cost of sale. You know, how much your budget is per new member, as it was, how much you're spending versus the long-term benefit of them, and really having a good handle on that, I think is incredibly useful. Whether or not that's just an investment in time or whether there's financial investment as well. You know, there's an investment in every new member. And it's worth making that investment if the maths works out. If it's, you know, make that investment if it's going to be good for you. Don't spend more than you're going to generate from them, obviously, because you don't want to be working at a loss. But, you know, look at that in detail and really understand the investment and the value of the investment and why you should be making that investment, because you bring on the new members and they will bring more people as well in their own time. So there's also that sort of that legacy of the investment. You know, you bring on one new member, well, they're going to mention it to someone, and that becomes easier to sell on and on and on, bringing in future members in the long term.
Excellent, thank you. And Miguel?
I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And what I mean by that is, we talked a lot on this webinar about additional things that you can do. And I think we're all struggling with resources. We're all struggling with doing more. And I think it's sometimes really smart to take a step back and do less, and really figure out which things work. And if social media doesn't work for your association, if you're not really communicating, then it may be worth considering not being on social media or not running Google Ads. And I think we all appreciate an organization of any sort that can save us time, that can offer us succinct information and give us, you know, the thing that we need when we need it. Not more, not everything. I don't want a newsletter with 16 items. I want a newsletter with one item that I really find interesting. And if you can do that, then I think you're on a winning path. So I would suggest also thinking about reducing and kind of focusing. And I think associations, because traditionally, you know, funding is not unlimited, I think it's important to do that and not get stuck in shiny, bright light, kind of, I need to do all the marketing things all at the same time kind of situation.
I think it's very interesting that, you know, when we talk about operations, we talk about kind of closing down, doing things more efficiently. When we talk about growth, we're talking about marketing or sponsorship. We're talking about growing things, and sometimes I think you're absolutely right, Miguel. It's very difficult to know when to stop. And when you are losing that efficiency which you need to make sure that the money you're spending, and in fact the time you're spending, because time is money, you know, an hour of your time has a within your association has a financial tag. So bear that in mind when you're doing work. We're very shortly run out of time. So just a quick note about, if you can show the next slide, please, Alice. The next webinar, we'll be talking about the future of event tech. What does it hold? What do we see? What have we seen change over the past 12 months? What have we got coming up? And who are the leaders in that field, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And just to bring the panel back on again once more, to say thank you very, very much to Adam and Miguel and to Sarah for giving up your valuable time today. It's always appreciated. This will be available on YouTube on demand, and we hope we will see you at the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
No problem. Thank you.